In this video, I'll go through some design tips when you make your InterformNG templates. Whenever you want to insert some output in InterformNG, you need to define a page element, and inside the page element you have a statics folder containing a pre and a post folder. That's where you should normally place the headers and the footers of your design, so it means the elements that you want to include on as good as any page of your output. Outside the statics, you place elements that you want to execute only once, and there we would normally insert a flow area for each, going through all of the detail nodes in your XML file. For the output, you can consider to place all your elements in the output one by one individually, but it definitely makes sense to group them, and for grouping, for a physical group, you have the fixed area and the flow area at your disposal. If you place your elements inside a fixed area, then all the elements are placed relative to this area, and you can move all of these elements as a group by simply moving the fixed area. The flow area is a way to group the elements together, but still placing these elements relative to each other, so that is what we would normally use for creating detail lines. So let's jump to the designer and take a look. So here we have a page element. Inside of that page element we have the pre and the post folders inside the statics, so that's where we would normally place, for instance, an address or some header footer elements. So as I mentioned, you can actually place simple text like this, and if you place it inside of the pre or the post folder, it will appear on all the pages that is the result of this page element, because this single page element in your design can result in multiple pages of output. But as I mentioned, it's a very good idea to group these elements together, and for that you have these two physical groups. You have the fixed area and you have the flow area. To place either one of these, you click the element here, or first you actually click in the tree where you want to insert it, then select the specific kind of area you want to insert and click in the output. So that is what I've done with this fixed area. Inside of this fixed area I've placed a box, and then I've also placed the text of my XML file. So that's how I've built up this area. So the good thing about grouping these elements into one for this fixed area is that I can actually drag here for the area and move it to a new position, and then I have repositioned all the elements in one go. Another way to place this address is to go in another direction. So we can actually place a fixed area as the outer area, and then we could consider to actually group all of the elements inside. And here I've chosen to have a fixed area first and then a flow area inside. So first in my fixed area I've placed my box or frame around my address, and here in my fixed area I've also placed a flow area. So this flow area has a reference or a position, so that is the start position that's right here. So that's relative to the fixed area I've placed it inside. And now when I place my elements, you may notice here that the positions from top and left are all 0. So what I do is actually I've placed a text element, and when I do that, insert a text element inside a flow area, then the position of each of the elements will be 0. So that is 0 relative to the previous element. With the new line, I make sure to have a line break and place my second element just below. So here you have two ways of making an address, and I would say it's a very good idea to consider this layout where you have a fixed area and especially a flow area for your address. The difference is evident if I, for instance, choose to insert an additional text element inside. Text and a new line. Then you can see that it's possible to insert a new text just in the middle, and it will just push the subsequent lines further below. If I do it here for my fixed area where I don't have a flow area, then I would need to reposition the elements below and find out where to place them. So that would make my life a little bit harder if I want to rearrange something here. Another advantage with the flow area is that it would automatically adapt if I should choose another size of font. So if I choose a larger font, of course it's outside my frame, but still you can see that the line height adapts. If I just go back to 12, you can also see here's a more appropriate font size. For the line distance here, I can also set that in my flow area. If I have a specific line height that I want to use, then it's just a matter of typing that in here. So that's why I think it's more flexible to use a flow area whenever possible. So if we consider the detail lines, I have some detail lines here in my output. If we just go down here, we have a couple of detail lines. So in order to place my detail lines, I would normally consider to place a flow area outside the statics, and then inside my flow area, which of course is this element. So it's just a matter of selecting that and clicking in the output. Inside my flow area, I've chosen to insert a for each. So the for each is this element. So I say for each node in my output, I want to iterate across those, and for each of those I want to output my information from my detail lines. So here I have my detail lines and I want to place them in nice columns, and you can see I haven't been very successful about that here in this case. So let me just go through what I've done. I have a for each, and then I have inserted my text elements with the XPath reference to my XML file, and all of these I have placed them with the other rows here. I've chosen to have a reposition of 1 centimeter to the right, but that repositioning is relative to the width of the previous one. So you may notice here that these two texts don't have the identical length. So it means that these are pushed relative to the length of the previous element. So it causes a bit of distortion for these columns. So apparently it's not that easy or just as simple just to make a flow area if you want to have normal nice columns. So what alternatives do we have? Well, I've built up another way, a better way to present your output. So if we just close this page element, I've prepared another one. So this is more or less identical. If we move on to the second page, you can see the result here, which is somewhat better. If you look at this flow area, we have still a flow area that, and inside of that we have a for each loop, which will iterate across all our detail lines. But in this case, I've chosen to insert a fixed area inside that And here I have my elements, the text elements, and these are now placed in an absolute position. So you can see this position from the left is the actual position relative to where my fixed area starts. So that's right here. So now I have total control in placing my texts, and they are placed individually, independently of the other elements. So that's one way of getting to our goal of having these nice columns. Of course, we still have a new line after the fixed area to advance further below for the next line. But we do actually have yet another option when you want to create these columns. So let me just minimize this page and look at the third page. Here I've used another technique, actually without using a fixed area. So let's check out how that's done. Well, first of all, we have a flow area, and it looks more or less the same as the first page. We don't have any fixed area here. What I've chosen to do is to set a fixed width of each of the text. So it means that this text has a specific width, and that's something that has been defined here. For a text element, you can set up advanced settings, set up a frame width, or actually width of the text to be a fixed size, and you specify that to be a number. And this number doesn't need necessarily to be a constant, but you can also define an XPath expression, so you can do all sorts of calculations or use a variable to define how wide this element should be. The actual value here is measured in fractions of an inch, so 240 equals 1 inch, and here we have 120, which of course means half an inch. So we have chosen to have this column to be half an inch, second column is 1 inch, and that is the same for all the others. So just remember to go in advanced settings, fixed, and a number, and specify the actual width. You may notice also here that the columns are also framed with these lines around the edges, and that's actually an option that you can enable on your flow area. If you go to the flow area and select styles, I've chosen here to have borders around the edge, and not only that, but also vertical lines in between each element, and also horizontal lines. So that's something that you can enable or disable depending on what you want for the output. The final little change I've done here is to center the text within the designated area, or the width that we have reserved for each of these, and that's something that you do right here under Width Adjustment Center. So that was the last way of making nice columns in your output. So let's go back to the PowerPoint here. So just to recap, so for the detail lines, if we go only with the flow area, well, the columns are then not properly aligned, and that's normally not what you want. If you insert a fixed area inside of the flow area, actually inside of the for each, then you have total control of the positions. If you have a flow area and you specify fixed width of the text, then you have these possible lines around each element, and not only that, but it's quite easy to rearrange the output sequence. And let me just go back and show you what I mean with that. So if you have here the individual elements, I can use my arrows here to rearrange the sequence of these. So please notice the output down here when I do up. So you can see the sequence here simply adapts, so I can choose in which column I want to place my model, for instance. So this is something that you cannot do as simply or as easily if you have only used a fixed area. And finally, let me just summarize this video. So you use the statics inside the page element to place headers and footers. It's a very good idea always to group your elements together in either a flow area or a fixed area. It is a very good idea to consider to use a flow area whenever possible, and then use, for instance, a fixed area inside of that in order to have nice columns, or set up fixed width of each of the text elements inside. Yeah. So with that, I hope I have given you some good ideas of how to build up your designs. For more information, I suggest you refer to the InterformNG manual or to the other videos here on YouTube. Thank you.